Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name's Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 55th episode this week after a little off-season hiatus, where we'll be reviewing and breaking down the Patriots 2023 draft selections, as well as discussing some news around the NFL. Also, in case you missed it, Kevin was a guest on the Boston Bowling podcast with Gabby Hurlbut last week, discussing the Patriots offseason and previewing the NFL draft. And we recommend that you go check it out and follow us. Go check it out. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at Pat's300levelpod.com, where we have some blogs and we'll be having some more blogs coming out soon regarding the draft. So, Kevin, welcome back after a little bit. We're going to be discussing some draft news. What was just your overall thoughts on Patriots selection, Patriots draft, and how everything went this past weekend?
Yeah, I think overall, I think they actually had a pretty good draft. A little sneaky good, I would say, because if you look at it from afar, some of the picks aren't really that really interesting. But I think they filled a lot of needs and really look to the future for a lot of needs, something that they haven't really done all the time. So I think it was actually a really good draft where you got really good value the first two picks. And then from there on, you're really filling the needs that you're going to need in the future, where you're actually prepping for loss of players, where they really haven't done that lately. So hopefully most of these picks will hit, and they've been pretty good the last couple of years. One thing I am a little afraid of is that everyone's ranking them as a pretty high draft grade overall. And that scares the death out of me, because usually it's the opposite. Usually if they're ranked really well, it's a bad draft. If they're ranked bad, it's a good draft and whatnot. So
yeah,
it does kind of scare me that they are ranked pretty high, but I think a lot of the consensus picks that they would have gone with, they went with. So luckily it wasn't anything really completely off left field, where you have like Tavon Wilson, like one of those picks where you have those second round kiss of deaths where like, why the hell did they pick that player? Whereas the player they picked with White, he was some people thought he was going to be a number one draft pick, and the Patriots were rumored to were thinking about trading back into the first round to get him. So to have kind of those consensus safer picks make me feel a little bit better too, than if it was a high graded and they maybe had some of those weird ones. So
yeah, no, that's the one thing that does scare me is I do really like this draft, and one of the things with the draft is you never really know until 2 to 3 years out at least if the draft is good or not. The thing that scares me is that everyone's saying, or a lot of people are saying, it's a really good draft, and this is just giving me flashbacks to the last time they had a really good draft, which was 2019, when not Kendrick Bourne, N'Keal Harry, most people gave an A grade on that pick. Jawan Williams, people gave an A grade on that pick, and then those turned out to be two of the biggest busts in Patriots draft history, Belichick draft history. So that is the thing that scares me, is since people are saying it's good, it might not be. But I think they got a lot of value. You got a potential top 5 pick that fell all the way to 17. You got a potential first round defensive line pick that that you got at the second round, which I like him a lot. He's someone that a lot of people are comparing to like a mix between Dietrich Wise and Trey Flowers, where he can play on the edge, he can play on the inside a little bit, and he can give you some versatility in the run game and the pass game. And then you got some good depth as well later on in the draft, and then you took some flyers on some low risk, high reward players at the end of the draft too. So I really like it. You don't know if any of these picks are really going to pan out. You hope that most do, and if they do, then this could be a draft that really sets the franchise in the right direction going forward, especially with the last 2 drafts really hitting as well. Last 3 drafts are really hitting.
Yep. And I think that's one of the things too that I really like about what I've seen when Matt Groh's been kind of leading that draft room and leading kind of player operations, where the picks that he's going with aren't those ones where it's like, oh, he's from Michigan or he's from Alabama or he's in one of these 3 schools that we know they're going to draft from. He's really looking to see all sorts of players, and he's drafting athletes. He's not drafting for a particular like, oh, this would be a really good matchup for this. They're trying to really get, and this is I think really kind of the catchphrase for this draft for them is that best player available. They
Yep.
pretty much did that, where they weren't saying we need a tight end, we need an overdraft for one, or we need an offensive tackle, we need to overdraft for one. Where
Yeah,
Frederick
essentially what they did with
Jones,
the two tight ends in 2020, Dalton Keene and Devin
yeah,
Asiasi, they needed a
mhm,
tight end, so they overreached for both of them, and both
yeah,
didn't pan out.
and that's something that he brought up. So going into this, the no tight end is that they went a lot faster than they're expecting, and he didn't want to be in that position where they're just drafting one to draft one, where it wasn't the right value for them at that point. And that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to go overreaching and having a wasted draft pick because of that. So he seems pretty in tune with knowing the value and not getting a little panicked and scared, which is really good. In the fact that it's, again, he's drafting these athletes and the best player available, where um, it can give them some pretty good value there. So I'm really excited about seeing that, and excited to see how this draft class goes. Not every one of them is probably going to be a win, and we know that. You're lucky if 50% of your draft picks hit. That's a success. So
Yep.
we'll see how that goes. But I'm really excited just to see and kind of go into each of these players individually about that. And then even just anything you want to mention on that, or I've got another one more
Yeah,
thing.
I think the one thing too though I'm just a little intrigued about or curious about was when they traded back from 14 to 17 when they had their eyes on Christian Gonzalez. It was a risk. I mean, they
Mhm.
viewed the draft board and who was behind them, and they felt comfortable that the Jets and the Redskins
Commanders.
or Commanders weren't going to draft him. But if someone else traded up to get him, like he could have been gone, and that's a risk you
Mhm.
take. I'd be very interested to see who they would have gone with, because he said there were a couple people that they were comfortable going with too. Would it have been JSN from OSU, or would it have been O tackle? That's just something
Mhm.
I always think about when they trade back, because it is a risk in case the player
Mhm.
they want isn't there anymore.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point, where I think they, like you said, they read the board really well, saying that we know that the Steelers are going to pick this person. We know that the Jets are going to go on this person. We know that the Commanders are going to. That's the really big question, though, would be what happens if another team wanted to trade up and jump to grab one of those players and grab Gonzalez? They would have been completely. You don't know who else is going to trade for him. You don't know when that's going to happen. So,
Yeah.
who are those other players available? The other one too. If the Commanders took Gonzalez, maybe they would have taken. Except they had a feeling that they weren't going to pick Gonzalez. They're going to pick the
Yeah,
corner they
because I think
got.
Commanders play zone D,
Mhm.
and that's why they went with the guy they
Yeah.
went. But you know, you don't want to be like the Jets, where the Jets had their eyes on Broderick Jones,
Mhm.
and then once the Steelers traded up and got Broderick Jones, they were left flabbergasted and didn't know what to do, and they made a panic pick of someone.
Mhm.
Or we think it's a panic pick. We never really know,
Yeah.
but
Well, it seemed like they tried to trade the pick, I think, because they
yeah,
were on the clock for so long,
yep,
and when they couldn't get someone to jump forward, that's when they ended up having to pick someone that they weren't really enamored with as much.
yeah,
They probably didn't have that grade for him, especially because you drafted Sauce Gardner last year.
hmm,
Um, if you're really doing best player available at that point, if you're really not in love with that player you're getting, maybe it might make sense to go for another corner, but I
yeah.
don't really know. It's kind of really overkill at that point. Um, the other thing also about the no offensive tackle taken, one thing that I think we were kind of both wrong on was Broderick Jones, because he was available to them at 14. Um,
I never really liked Broderick Jones.
yeah,
He was I believe a redshirt sophomore that only played about 17 games. He was very raw,
mhm,
and for Bill Belichick type early round pick, he wasn't someone that really fit the build. So that's why I never really thought they were going to
mhm.
be going after Broderick.
Yep, I was gonna say I was at least high on him, and I'll admit I was wrong. And a couple things that I think I missed on that. One, like you said, the playing amount. When Belichick's taking a player that high in the first round, they have to be surefire number one picks without really any question marks. So, with him basically playing what, a season and a half, I think,
Yeah, a
that's
little less than
one
that.
big question mark, saying what does he really look like. The second question mark was that there's coming out reports leading up to the draft, not as early as when we were talking about it, but really the day before, and I think maybe 2 days before the draft, that there was some actual um, character and really work ethic issues that were questionable with him. again, what they are, we don't really know. We saw Greg Bedard had Christian Barmore a couple of years ago, and Barmore has been perfectly fine. So, is it something really that we're you have to worry about or not? Who really knows? But usually, when those things start getting floated out there, it's something that will maybe give a team a little bit of hesitancy. Is, do I really want to use a 14 pick on this?
Yeah.
When there is a chance that there could be something. So that might make a little more sense. And if I known a couple of those things out there, well, just the character thing, I should have known the red shirt part, but
Yeah.
I wanted to overlook it just because of his size. So that's why it makes sense for that. All right. Anything you wanted to get to else before we kind of dive into the picks?
Not really. I think we'll get into this in a little bit, but I think the only other surprise for some Patriots fans was that based on how this offense was last year, a lot of people were hoping that they'd make a lot of offseason acquisitions to address the offensive skill position.
Mhm.
You lost Damian Harris, which spent half his time on the injury practice field, but when he was in the game, he was very reliable running back, and you didn't really replace him. You got a low risk, high reward player in James Robinson. And then you have the rookies from last year, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris. And then at wide receiver position, you lost Nelson Aguilar, which isn't really a big, if anything, it's probably helping you. And then you also lost Jacoby Myers and only added Juju Smith-Schuster. And then at tight end, you swapped out Jonnu Smith for Gesicki. So a lot of comparables to last year without any really big upgrade. So I think a lot of people were thinking that maybe they'd go after a skill position player early on, either a tight end or wide receiver. And that's something they didn't really do until the 6th round. So I think that was one of the only surprises, and we'll get into it in a little bit. I wasn't really expecting them to go after anyone early on in the draft, except maybe the Dalton Kincaid tight end, because he's more of a slot. He's kind of like a Gesicki type. But other than that, I wasn't really expecting anything, also based on how their depth chart is constructed right now.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too is that, and I think I tweeted this out at some point, or maybe it's just me talking to you, where everyone's saying, oh, where are the weapons for Mac? Why aren't they drafting someone when it was the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th? We drafted a kicker in the 4th round.
Yeah.
Where are the weapons for Mac? This was supposed to be almost a historically bad wide receiver group in the draft,
especially in comparison to the receiver groups the last 3 or 4 years.
So if this draft class was this bad at wide receiver and they were to pick someone, and likelihood is they would probably be bad, what would people be saying when they do suck? Like, oh, Belichick can't draft a wide receiver, where he's actually saying, well, I'm not going to risk drafting a wide receiver this high because the value just isn't there. Where the only real person I think that could have really success in this team would have been probably Zay Flowers, just because of his speediness, his shiftiness, and he put up production at BC.
I think JSN was a more safer pick. I think he would have a higher floor, maybe a lower ceiling than Flowers. I think Flowers does have a potential to be a bust, but I do like Flowers too. But those are the only 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, and even then, are they worth a first round pick? Where they're not really the type of build of a receiver that you would take in the 1st round.
Yep.
That you would want as a number 1 wide receiver. And again, are they going to be number 1 wide receivers? I have my doubts of that. I think they'd be really good wide receivers. But are they going to be that prototypical number 1 wide receiver that you need to have? I don't know.
And then if you get them in the 1st round in 4 years, are you giving them that 5th-year option?
Yeah.
If they're only good, not great receivers, chances are you're not, and you kind of wasted using that 1st round pick.
Exactly. So yeah, that was just one of the big things, was like everyone's clamoring for some weapons to be drafted, and realistically there aren't any weapons to draft. So you look at the end picks that they had, and they have the potential to be weapons. They also have the potential to be completely flame out of the NFL before the season even starts.
Yeah. So, Butte, for instance, he could be, for potential, he has the potential to be the best wide receiver in this whole draft. Before the season, people were saying he was the best wide receiver in the whole class, and then he had an awful year and he was coming back from injury. So you never know. But if he gets his head on right and commits to it, he could be the best receiver in the draft, and you took him in the 6th round.
Yeah.
But he might not make the roster, so you never know. You can't bet on that.
So we'll get on that a little bit more when we get to pick by pick, but it's just that you can't go clamoring for something when there isn't something to actually get. And then the other thing with tight end, where do you really want them to overdraft someone like they did with Keene and like they did with Asiasi?
Yeah.
No, you don't want that happening. So if the player isn't there at the right spot, don't go overdrafting. Just get someone else instead.
Yeah.
So I'm not really too upset about that. And then the other big thing is just not about the draft in general, but just like the depth chart, like you mentioned. You look at the players that they have; they're not bad. Kenrick Bourne, both of us really like a lot.
Yep.
And I think with a real offensive coordinator, real coaching, he should get to be how he was the end of 2021.
That's true. The thing with Bourne though is I honestly, based on if the 2 draft 6th-round picks hit, which
Mhm,
I don't know if they will since they're 6th-round picks, but if they do hit, I think he's the one that might not even make the roster.
mhm.
I think out of the 3, the 2 6th-round picks and Bourne, I think only 2 of the 3 are going to make the roster,
Mhm.
assuming everyone else is healthy.
Yep. But then the other ones, Parker,
Yeah.
is a pretty good wide receiver. They actually figured out really how to utilize him best at towards the end of last year.
Mhm.
And then you have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's a little step above what Jacoby Myers was last year. He's got more yak. He's a little bit more explosive. And then Tyquan Thornton is he going to take another step forward? Where he was your 2nd-round pick last year. He showed a lot of promise at the beginning, kind of regressed a little bit, had the injury, and then it kind of seemed like he was really lost towards the end. But everyone was pretty lost, so I'm willing to give
Yeah.
him a big pass on that. So, how much is Bill O'Brien going to get out of this team? I think it's going to be a lot more, and Adrian Clem as well. So,
Yeah.
I think the 2 biggest upgrades they could have ever done in their offense wasn't even a player; it was the coaching, because their
Yep.
coaching was that bad last year.
And the thing with that is the offense is very similar to the 2021 offense, which made the playoffs and was I think 5th in scoring in the NFL. And similar personnel, just last year they just had a significant decrease in coaching. So bringing back Bill O'Brien, you have some changes on offense where you added the rookies, you got rid of Jacoby Myers, you added Juju Smith-Schuster, you got rid of Jonnu Smith, you added Gesicki, but still very comparable players, at least on paper. So this offense with Matt going into his 3rd year with much improved offensive coordinator and a much improved offensive coordinator, this offense, it's probably not going to be the number 1 scoring offense in the league. It might not be able to put up with the Chiefs, but you might not need it to be based on how good this defense can be. So as long as if this can be a top 10 offense, the running game mixed with the passing game, and then a potentially top 5, top 3 defense, you're going to have a chance to win some ball games and possibly go on a deep playoff run.
Yep. Yeah, I 100%
Possibly. I'm
agree.
not saying they're going to, but that's how this roster is built. More like the
Mhm.
early 2000s Patriots, where you go have a really good running attack. You have players that can really excel in the short passing game, and you have a lockdown defense.
Yep. All right. Going into round 1, pick
Yes.
17, Christian Gonzalez. Before I kind of mention, actually, I'll bring us up with them. Pretty much with a lot of these draft picks, and this would be kind of the key kind of phrase for each of them is athlete, like I mentioned before. And the other big thing was speed. Speed is what Grum mentioned last year. He said it again this
If you want to get fast guys, if
you
you want to
draft
get faster, you
faster, you
draft
draft
fast
fast
guys.
guys. And he said it again, where and you look at the RAS scores. We talked about this last draft, and I really wish that we had put out some more predictions and just utilize RAS, because we probably would have grabbed some.
Yeah.
Because you look at these players that they drafted, Chris Gonzalez leads the pack. RAS score of 9.95. So it's 9.95 out of 10. Again, RAS relative athletic score. It basically shows how athletic this player is for
I
that
believe his
position.
RAS score was the exact same as Jalen Ramsey, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken.
So Gonzalez is pretty much what they've been looking for corner ever since Stephon Gilmore left. He's big, he's fast, and he looks really fluid on tape. If you watch his
Yeah.
tape, his hips move really, really easily. He turns really well. He follows the receiver really well. Follows him on the hip. He just really looks like a lockdown cornerback, and that's something that they've needed. I think he's going to be a step above what Jason Jackson gave them back in 2021. So I'm really excited to see what they do with him. I can't remember his height. I didn't write it down.
I believe he's
6'1", I
6'2",
think. 6'1",
6'1",
6'2".
6'2".
Ran a 4.33. That's just awesome to have that height, that build, and then also that speed. and that's something they've been needing and something that they need to have a lockdown defense. So by having him on one end, then you can have Jack Jones on the other, assuming that his head's on right, and then you could have Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones somehow figuring out the slot, or Robert or whatever Taylor had mentioned before. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, Taylor Kyles
Teo Kyles,
is a really good Twitter to actually
analyst.
follow, analyst.
Yeah.
And he kind of breaks down some things too that we like to partner with. So he could. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing with Christian Gonzalez that also is really intriguing is not only is he the most fluid cornerback in the draft, and his height and his speed and his athleticism, he's only 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He was born after the Patriots won their first Super Bowl. So he wasn't even alive to see that, which is crazy of how it makes me feel very old that that's the case. But having someone that young, that athletic, and someone who has everything in place to become an elite cornerback in this league, will he? That's something we'll have to wait and see. But he has all the tools in the world to become a elite top 5 lockdown corner in the NFL, and getting him to having other good cornerbacks on the roster as well, as deep as this defensive back room is, you don't have to necessarily rely on him, throw him out to the Wolves day one. You can ease him in if you don't feel that he's there yet, having Jack Jones, having Jonathan Jones. And then the only thing with him, which is some people speculate why he might have not gone as early, is he is a little lighter. As at cornerback, he has to add on a little weight, a little bulk. He didn't really seem, he wouldn't really, wasn't a great tackler, partially because of his size. So the Patriots usually rely on really good tackling cornerbacks, and that's something he'll have to work on and get better at. And that will come with just getting older, adding some weight on, adding some muscle. But overall, I really like this pick. This is, outside of the Mac Jones pick a couple of years ago, this is one of the only times we ever got a Patriots pick live correct with our prediction. The mock draft I put out ahead of time, I didn't pick him because I wasn't expecting him to be available at 14 or 17. I wasn't even really expecting 10 or later. I thought if there was someone that they liked at 10, they would trade up. I didn't think he would be available at 10. But when he was available at 14, when it was available at 17, that's who I was hoping they would get, and I'm really glad they did.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna say both of us. Each time the pick came up, we're like, oh, they're gonna have to draft Christian Gonzalez. It's a no-brainer because, again, when I was looking at it, when I was predicting Broderick Jones, I did not even think Christian Gonzalez was going to get out of the top 10. I was thinking it was maybe 7, 8. And
Yeah,
if you really wanted
5 to
him,
8.
you would have to trade up for him. I was like, I don't think they're going to trade up for a corner. And there were some rumors. Apparently, they were also thinking about trading up to take him. So, it's actually kind of cool that they will actually fall back and still grab him. So, again, I'm just really excited to have him on board, and can't really wait to see what happens with him. Round 2, Keon White, edge, Georgia Tech. Again, RAS score really, really high, 9.92. Again, this guy had a first round draft grade for a lot of teams, and that's why he was also invited to day one of draft, because they were thinking that the NFL thought that a team might pick him in the first round. So he's a really good athlete, really good edge guy. And again, like you said, that kind of mix between Trey Flowers and Dietrich Wise. And again, something that I don't really get was with Greg Bedard killing this pick, saying, oh, he doesn't have a position, they don't really need him, where he's clear and above the best pick that you could have with that pick.
Yeah.
Right there. And number 2, you shouldn't be expecting anything out of your draft picks other than the first round, pretty much in the first year. It's really year 2, year 3, like you said.
You're hoping for some contributions here or there, but you're not expecting them to be a potential Pro Bowler year 1.
So with that on the case, all these defensive linemen are getting older. Guy may not make the team this year. Dietrich Wise isn't getting any younger. And
although he did have a career year last year, you have to give him that.
He did. But I need to see it 2 years in a row.
And in case you're new to our podcast, Kevin has been the biggest Dietrich Wise hater up until last year.
Yeah. So we'll see how that works. But it just, when you can add that type of athlete and add that type of player, you do it. You don't go saying, oh, where am I going to fit him? You find a way to fit him in. So it's not that big of an issue. And
Oh, go ahead.
he's a beast.
Yeah.
So
No, you're adding someone with incredible athleticism and size. He's 6'5", 285. Um, you compare him with, if you have him on the, as you were saying, Judon's getting older. Uche's on his last year of the contract. He doesn't really fit the same style as Uche, but he can rush the passer, and then he can also shift inside as well. If you're running a 3-4, if you're running a 4-3, he can be on the inside or outside. Even if you're running a 3 down lineman and then 2 edges on the outside, he's someone that can fit the inside edge as well. So I really like the pick. At the time, I was hoping that they'd go Dewan Jones, tackle from Ohio State, because he reminds me of Trent Brown 2.0, 6'8", 360 beast. But after he slid to the 4th round, there are a lot of reports coming out about off the field issues, work ethic, character issues. So we don't know. Again, we don't know how realistic that is or how valid they are. But that's the reason why I didn't want Keon White. I wanted Dewan Jones. But considering everything in and all of itself, I really like the pick of Keon White.
Yep. All right. Moving on. Round 3, pick 76. I may butcher this last name. Marte Mapu.
Yes.
Safety linebacker. They announced him as a linebacker. I think that's really what they're going to use him more towards. Out of Sacramento, he didn't have a RAS score, but if you just look at him and look at his play, he's extremely athletic. Really fast. Is a really good tackler, hard hitter. And actually really excited to see what he could bring to this linebacker core. Again, I'm going to maybe shit on Greg Bedard one more time, but he's been saying, everyone's been saying for years, they need to get faster at linebacker. They got to get better at linebacker. They don't have any speed. They can't really match up with the Bills or any of these high power offenses. And they draft exactly what you've been looking for, exactly what everyone's been looking for, that linebacker safety sort of hybrid, but more probably as a linebacker. And he says, "Oh, there's no room for him on the roster. They've got McMillan, they've got
Who might
Wilson,
not make the roster.
yeah,
Wilson, who might
they've
not
got all
make the
these
roster.
players where they're on 1-year deals and they're not the future. Like this is exactly what everyone's been clamoring for the Patriots, where they're saying they're too slow at the linebacker. They're not fast enough to keep up with these offenses, with these mobile quarterbacks. This is exactly the guy you need. And then let's say they're not able to re-sign Duggar, where they have a boatload of cap space next year. So that may not even be the case. So we may see a lot of restructures going on and extensions before the season starts, because they all have that space there. That's probably last on the list of things to do. But he could take over for Tugger. But if not, he could be that number one linebacker that they've been searching for, that has speed, that has power, that can stop the run, but also stop any of the passing attacks. And I'm really excited to kind of see what he brings. And he just really has everything. He's got the speed, he's got the tackling, he's got the power. And it's really excited to see kind of what he brings.
Yeah, and Marte Mapu is the only pick that I actually made correct in my mock draft. Grant, I had him going in the 4th round, but again, I really like this pick. In the NFL today, you don't really have the traditional linebackers that you did 10, 20 years ago, where you have the outside linebackers like Terrell Suggs and then an inside linebacker like Brian Urlacher. You have a lot of different safety linebacker hybrids that are more like Kyle Duggar, who will play linebacker, who will play safety, and he fits this mold perfectly. He's a little lighter on the linebacker side. He's only, I think, 216. He's 6'3", 216, so he is the lightest linebacker in the linebacker room. But he still has a lot of power, a lot of strength, and I'm sure he's going to be putting on some strength as well when he gets here. In college, he played a lot. He played safety, he played linebacker, he played edge, he played some slot corner. So kind of exactly what Bill Belichick loves to look for, positional versatility. And he's someone that Taylor Kyles, who you mentioned earlier, he's projecting that in this defense, he might be able to get 7 sacks this year as a rookie based on the pass rush that they have with the front 7, along with his positional versatility as well, where he might be able to play inside the box like Duggar used to, and then have Duggar play some freelance safety all across the field. So that's something that I think he'll slowly be worked into the defense based on how deep they are at the defensive back position in the front 7. But I think this is someone that can also, for the future, really help this defense, but also make some key impacts this year as well.
Yep. And then versatility is another big thing that you mentioned, where Bill actually called us out when he was talking about him after the draft that day was over. We were saying where someone was asking what he thought his role would be. And he said, well, realistically, by how much he can do, it may vary week to week what we use him in. He could be linebacker 1 week, he could be safety 1 week, could be edge 1 week. And just that versatility is really key. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention too about Keon White, where there was a wheel route that he ended up actually covering.
Yeah.
And you don't usually see that from a 295.
6'5", 285.
285, a 285-pound lineman. And he actually
against a running back.
Yeah, and he actually covered it really well. So that just really shows you the speed and power that he has. So again, back to Mapu. Excited to kind of see what he brings, all that versatility. Round 4 of their many picks in round 4. The first one, 107, was Jake Andrews, guard from Troy. He's actually going to be probably a center, backup center right now. And this makes a lot of sense. This is one thing that I had tweeted out that that day, actually really right, I think it was right before they picked.
Yeah, like I think it was like a couple, maybe 10 minutes before they picked.
Yeah, 10 minutes before I picked. Someone had mentioned like a couple positions they thought they would pick. I think tackle, tight end, or what have you. I can't remember what they were. And I was like, I really wouldn't be surprised if they pick a center today, because David Andrews isn't getting any younger. He's what, 30, 31. And they don't really have a backup center. They have Ferentz, who blows. So they don't really have someone that they could really rely on there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted someone to be the backup center. And
Andrews is 30, turning 31 over the summer.
All right. And then that way they have someone to they could be groomed for when Andrews does end up leaving the Patriots. So again, they picked another Andrews who actually really looks like David Andrews. So it's really kind of weird. And I don't really have much to say about his RAS. We've been talking about RAS score. That's 7.51, pretty good one. Anything above 5 is actually considered to be really good. So not really much to say. I think he seems like he's going to be a really good pick. He did really well at Troy. Smaller schools, the only thing. So it actually may be even a better pick than what a lot of people think, just because there's not much out there for how he does. But again, you have less competition going up against. So you're not fully tested to see how you'll do. So what do you think?
No, I agree. And I think that's the thing with the 3 offensive linemen that they picked on this 4th round is that it's not necessarily a position of need for this year, barring injuries. And that's something that can really help the players develop, where they're not thrown in and they're not ready to play yet. So you give them time to develop over the summer, this first year, assuming everyone stays healthy. And then in the future, that's when you might need them, and that's when they're ready. So I think the interior offensive linemen overall, possibly barring City So, we might not know for a couple of years how these picks turn out. But I everything I've seen, it's tough to know 100%, but it seems like he's a tough nosed guard and center who gives you positional versatility on the inside as well, where he can play either guard position or center, which helps out the Patriots as well, especially in a depth position.
Yep. All right, moving on to the next 4th round pick. Pick 112, Chad Ryland, kicker from Maryland. Talking about athletes, he has no RAS score. He's a kicker. So again, a lot of people are like, what the hell are they picking a kicker for in the 4th round? That's crazy. Why are you doing special teams? You value special teams too much on this team. But you look at how the Patriots lost last year. They lost the Bills game because of their kicker. Because Falk could not kick into the end zone and get touchbacks. They had those kick returns for touchdowns.
And then they had the kick return against the Vikings too for a touchdown, which lost them the game too.
Yep, causing them the loss. So kicker is actually a pretty valuable position where when you're drafting, if this is a really good kicker, we saw it with Steven Gostkowski. He was picked in the 4th round. And I think the big thing with this is there was reports before the draft even started where there was a bunch of kickers out there that they actually were expecting people to pick in the 4th round. So once the Michigan kicker, I can't remember his name, went in the 3rd round to the 49ers.
Mooney?
I think that might be it. I was going to say Marby, but Mooney sounds more right. Once the Michigan guy went to the 49ers, he was the clear number 1 kicker out there. Everyone knew there was going to be a run on kickers. So the Patriots got the surefire number 2 kicker that was out there, with Chad Ryland. He's got a big leg, kicked at least I think at least a 50-yard field goal in each of his seasons or something like that.
Yeah.
But he's got a pretty big leg. Did pretty well at Maryland. And if this is the guy and they think that he's going to be really good, I have no problem with them using a fourth round pick, because we've seen what bad kickers can do, and we can be kind of really spoiled here with kickers,
Yeah.
where you went from Vinatieri to Gostowski to Nick Folk was probably actually the best out of all three of them, which you would have
Yeah.
never expected.
And even when Gostowski was hurt for a year, you had Shane Graham, who didn't miss a kick when he was
mhm.
here.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah.
they've gotten really lucky. And if this is the guy, I have no problem with them using a fourth round pick, because kicker, that there's points there, and it could also cost you points with the touchbacks.
No, I agree. I think the one thing that kind of surprised me was how early they picked a kicker, because I still really like Nick Folk. He's been pretty much nails since he got here. He did fall off a little bit as the season went on last year. He missed a couple more kicks than normal. I thought they were going to bring in someone maybe in the 6th round, maybe an undrafted guy just for competition, but this would be Nick Folk's job again. But I think the one thing that hurt him was when Jake Bailey went down, they needed him to do the kickoffs, and that's something that he just wasn't able to do. He didn't have the leg.
Mhm.
So it kind of sucks to see Nick Folk likely go unless they carry 2 kickers, which nothing would shock me with Bill, where Ryland does the kickoffs, but I don't think they're spending a 4th round pick on a guy to just do kickoffs for a year.
Yep.
So we'll have to see, but he was really good at Eastern Michigan. He was really good at Maryland. He's good in cold weather. He says that he really thrives kicking in cold weather, and that's something that he's going to have to do here in New England. So we'll see, but usually I trust Bill with special teams players outside of Rawasser, which was kind of an unexpected pick that just didn't pan out, but usually he's nails with this, so I trust his decision.
Yep. All right, moving on. Next, the last 4th round pick, pick 117, City So. You had actually mentioned before, guard/tackle, Eastern Michigan. Again, back to the athletes, 9.72 on the RAS score. This guy was actually kind of talked about before the draft, where Scarnecchia had actually brought him up as someone that he really liked, and liked his versatility, and liked really his skill set, and thought that he was going to be a lot better as he got on. So that was actually one thing that I was like, oh, when they mentioned him being Canadian, I was like, oh, that's the same guy that Scarnecchia liked. With him, he was listed as a guard, is how they kind of announced them. But he's played tackle before. I think that's where he originally started at. And
I think it was either high school or his freshman year of college.
I think it was
He
his freshman
tackle.
year he played tackle. So he has the ability to play tackle. And I think this is one of those situations where you have like a Wenu from before, where he was a guard, but he can play tackle and play tackle really well. So I would not be shocked if we see him actually playing tackle this year, if he does pan out initially, or have him be the backup tackle to one of the guys that they had signed. So I wouldn't be surprised too much, and that would make these picks make a lot more sense. Where why would you pick 2 guards where this one actually maybe more
Possibly
seen as a
3
tackle?
guards.
Yeah, possibly 3 guards.
Yeah.
So why would you pick 3 guards when you guard isn't valued as much? But that might make a lot more sense if he is a tackle. So I'm not too worried there. He's a really good pick from what everyone's saying. If Scarnecchia likes him, that's pretty much good enough for me. I don't need to really question him.
Yep, exactly what you said. And then the other thing too is the run on guards and interior linemen it doesn't seem like it's a good sign that they're going to be able to keep Big Mike Onwenu, where you draft 3 guys with one of them possibly being his replacement. He is heading into his last year on a contract, and there's a guard from the Falcons who I believe got an insane contract extension this year of I think 20 or 22 million a year, which for a guard is insane. So if I'm like Onwenu, I want at least that, if not more. And I don't think Bill's going to pay that much for a guard. So I think the writing's on the wall. Maybe they'll be able to work something out, but if not, you're laying the seeds to have a replacement in-house for him next year.
Yep. And that brings us to round 5, pick 144. again, round fives, Belichick actually, if you look at the pick history of how many picks he has in each round and how many he takes, round five is actually probably the least, not probably, is the least out of all the
Yeah.
picks, because that's where he feels that the talent really drops off between the fourth and the sixth round, where there's not really any difference between a fifth round pick and a sixth round pick. So he doesn't really value that. That's why we usually see special teamers. That's why he picked Rawwasser, or he picked I think
Cardona.
Cardona was a fifth round
Yeah.
pick. Jake Bailey, fifth round pick.
I think he was fourth.
All right. But usually he stays.
Gostowski, I think, was fifth.
Gostowski was
Was he
fourth.
fourth?
I was checking today. So that's why I usually see a lot more special teamers in the fifth round. But I think Mafi could be the exception to that, because
Yeah.
Rafi,
Bailey was a fifth. You're right.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about athletes. He has no RAS, but you look at the man, like, he is a big dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just having
He's
that
like
size,
Michael Wenyu size.
yeah. So he's a big, strong guy. And I think you mentioned So being the perfect replacement for Owenu. I think actually Mafi would be the better replacement for Owenu at guard and having So play tackle. So not really much to say on Mafi. Just
I wasn't
he's a
saying
beast.
So is going to be a replacement. I was saying getting three
Yeah.
interior linemen
Okay.
in general. One of them will be the replacement.
Yep. All right. That's all I had on Mafi, though. What do you got?
No, I think Mafi I like a lot. He's a very big, very strong guy, 6'4", 340 for a guard, has some size, has power, has some speed and athleticism too for a guard, which they'll need in the power running game, especially for pulls. He played with under Chip Kelly, who has a good relationship with Bill Belichick. And am I mistaken that he was also in the Shrine Bowl for the Patriots? Or is that City Sal? I know one of them was in the Shrine Bowl. I believe it was Mafi. But I'll check on that and get back to you in a minute. But he just seen it's a fifth round pick, so you're not relying on him to day one. He might not even be on the team in a couple of years, but it's a value pick, low risk, potentially high reward.
Yep. All right. Moving on to the kind of the low risk, high reward players coming up. First on round 6, 187. I'm going to butcher this name. I think you pronounced it probably more right than I did. Kayshon Boutte.
Yeah.
So wide receiver at LSU. RAS score in this one, I put an asterisk for our notes. It was a 4.99.
Okay.
But
just going back, Mafi was one of the 2 Shrine Bowl players that played for the Patriots that they drafted. So they saw him up close and personal.
And that gives them a lot more knowledge on that.
Yep.
So it makes me trust the pick a lot more because they got to work with him hands on. Boutte. RAS score 4.99, not really the right score to really measure up. He's saying that his ankle was still hurt at the combine when he measured out, that he would really normally run a 4.3, which makes more sense based on how he looked before. He didn't seem as slow as his combine stats were. But then there's always the risk that his ankle maybe never heals because I think he's had 2 surgeries on it from this year. But this player, like you had mentioned previously, coming into this year for college, he was projected to be the first wide receiver picked, where he had insane numbers and insane tape from his freshman and sophomore year. And then he ended up getting hurt in his sophomore year with a broken ankle, and then he required surgery. I think he required twice. That's why he was kind of hindered this year. But he's also had some off the field stuff where he had some coaching issues. I don't think he got along well with Brian Kelly at LSU is another thing. And then there's the rumor out there. I don't know if it's true or not, so don't go blaming me if it's wrong. But there is the rumor saying that he was part of some giant orgy party or something. So who knows if that lowered his stock? But if it's just the injury and the character stuff alone, even without that, that's some kind of cause for concern. That's why he dropped a lot. So, but like you had mentioned before, he has the ability, if he does go back to form, if he keeps his head on straight, if his ankle is fully healthy, he could be Jamar Chase. He could be Stephon Diggs. He could be one of these.
I think it's a little stretch to say he can be that level yet, but I think he can be a number 1 receiver on this team. Possibly he could get to that, but
he could. That's what I'm saying. He could get to it. I'm not saying he's gonna, even if he keeps his head on straight. I said that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Just by how much talent he has and what his size is and what his speed is, he could be one of those players. But like you had said before, he might not even make the team. He might do something stupid. He may be an idiot with the playbook. He may be cut before the end of the year, before the season even starts. So, but this is just, I think this is him and Douglas, I think, are the two people I'm most excited to watch
Yeah.
this training camp and this preseason, just because of the talent that they have. And actually even Speed and Bolden too.
Yeah. I'm
Because
interested in those four the most.
I actually predict that, and this is getting ahead of myself because we haven't not talking about it yet. Uh, I think one of those corners may end up being a pretty good starting cornerback for them in a year or two.
Yeah.
All right, but anything else you want to say on Booty?
No, I think it's just the perfect pick. It's round 6. So even if he is a bust, it doesn't matter. It's a 6th-round pick. But he could be an absolute steal if he gets his head on right, if he's able to fully come back from injury, buys into this coaching staff. He could be that number 1 pick, that number 1 receiver that everyone was clamoring for this offseason. And you didn't have to give up much to get him. You're still able to get an elite lockdown corner. You're able to get a first-round worthy defensive edge. And then you get a number 1 wide receiver in the 6th round. So low risk, high reward is the chances of him actually going out and doing that. I'd say maybe less than 50%, but it's worth the risk in the 6th round. So I'm very excited about it.
Yep. And I think the one thing that may help is just when you get to the NFL, when you see like the money that you can get, where you're like, oh, if I keep my head on straight, if I really work really hard, I can make a ton of money. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Next one of the 6th round picks, right? Yeah. 6th-round picks. Pick 192, Bryce Baringer, punter, Michigan State. No RAS score because he's a punter. Looks very, very nerdy with the glasses. Kind of like it though. I have nothing to really say about him other than he's got a giant leg. So I'm really excited to see kind of how he does. And I figured they're gonna get a punter just because they did sign one, but I figure they're gonna want some competition. I think he may just win the job just because he's got a bigger leg than the guy they signed. And
the guy they signed for 0 guaranteed money too. So it seemed like more camp leg with some competition, but I really like this pick. Again, I don't know too much about him. I haven't been following him like I did a certain punter last year in the draft process, who didn't end up panning out well for off the field issues. But Barringer has pretty much been one of the consensus number 1 punter in the draft. Him and then the guy from Rutgers as well. This guy has a really good leg. He also again hasn't kicked in great weather up in Michigan, so that's something that again they get to rely on. Not someone from say Florida who's always punting in really nice hot weather or something like that. So we'll have to see. He can't be any worse than the 2 punters they rolled out there last year. So how can you not like the pick?
All right. Next one. Round 6, pick 210, Demario Douglas, wide receiver, Liberty. RAS score of 7.34. I need to dive more in deep why he's only has a 7.34. I think it might be his height.
I think it's his size.
Yeah, I think it's his height and weight. But if you look at him, he's basically Marcus Jones on offense by his speed and his shiftiness. This is why, like I mentioned before, he's one of the picks I'm really excited about. It's actually crazy. I'm excited to watch 4 6th and 7th round picks on this team.
So I have the reason why his RAS is that score. His size is considered very poor. He's 5'8", 179 with a bench press of only 12 reps.
Yeah.
His agility is okay, but his explosion is considered elite and his speed is considered great.
Yeah. So just watching the tape on him, I didn't really know too much about him going into this, but what I've seen and what I've read about him, he basically looks like Marcus Jones on offense, a wide receiver Marcus Jones. So I think that's really intriguing just by how fast and shifty he is. They really lack that shifty slot wide receiver. And I think that he might be able to give them something like that. And also out of the backfield too, where he could do those wheel routes. He could do a lot of like this is something I mentioned about Marcus Jones before, where Marcus Jones could be your Tyreek Hill. Demarius Douglas could also be your Tyreek Hill. We're not saying he's going to be Tyreek Hill, but does a lot of the things that Hill does, where he does a lot of the jet sweeps, and he does the wheel routes, and he does the slants, and really crossers across the field to get his yak up there because he's so fast and shifty. So just really excited to see what happens with him. Again, he may not even make the roster. He's a 6th-round pick. But really interested to see what happens with him because he does have that speed and quickness and agility.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying, I think Evan Lazar called him, even before the draft, called him day 3 Zay Flowers, where he is very shifty. He is elusive. He's someone that you can run the jet sweeps of. And when he was at Liberty, I think he ran a jet sweep for 72 yards for a touchdown. He's very elusive. He could be that slot type cornerback as well. So he was another guy that they was at the Shrine Bowl and was with the Patriots for a week. So they got to see him up close and personal, got to see how he fit kind of with their scheme, and they felt comfortable going to get him. And I really like the pick. Again, it's low risk, high reward. He was at a slightly lower level of competition at Liberty last year compared to Zay Flowers, but I can only like it where, again, if he doesn't pan out, you're just wasting a 6th-round pick. If he does pan out, you could have a Deebo Samuel-esque type player, a Tyreek Hill-esque. Not saying he's going to be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, but he's someone that can give this offense another dimension.
Yep,
especially with Bill O'Brien at the helm.
All right. Next player, round 6, pick 214. Amir Speed, cornerback, Michigan State. RAS score 8.86, and like his last name says, he has speed. He runs a 4.3 40, really quick. A lot of things coming out about him was that he is a good special teamer, and they could see him drafted for that. I'm going to lump him into just Isaiah Bolden because I don't really have much detail about either of them, unless you have something specific you want to talk about speed.
Nothing in particular with him. I think just the thing with both him and Bolden is, especially for his late round pick, you're getting both a rare combination of great speed and great size. Both, I believe, are about 6'3", both with a 4.3 40, almost same size as Christian Gonzalez, both very athleticism and high speed. So again, as Matt Guerrero said, if you want to get fast, you draft fast guys, and that's what they did. And not only are they fast, they have really good size for a cornerback. So I don't know if either of them will make the roster, but if they do, you're adding just more athleticism to this team and more depth as well. It's at a position of strength now, where especially with them getting Christian Gonzalez, with the defensive backfield that they have as safety with Mills, Peppers, Duggar, Thomas. Or Phillips, sorry, not Thomas. You don't have to throw them into the wolves right at the beginning. You can develop them, and these are two people that late round picks. It's more developmental, where you don't have to throw them out there. You can develop them, and if they can hit it, if they can find their groove, that size and that speed is just something that's going to make this defense even more explosive and coming in the years to come, possibly even better. Again, they might not make the team, but it's the skill set that you're looking for that they really do have.
Yep. That's why I was saying before, I wouldn't be shocked if not this year, but in 1, 2, maybe 3 years, you see one of these guys be a starting cornerback for you, just because that speed, that size is very rare to have.
Yeah.
And they've done a really good job at coaching up cornerbacks. We've seen it over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And the
late round or undrafted cornerbacks, they've just always hit on.
Yeah. So is this going to be one of the guys that they get, like JC Jackson or Jonathan Jones or
Malcolm Butler, Alfonso Dennard for a couple of years? He was starting cornerback for a couple of years, and he was a 7th-round pick.
So like, are one of these two players going to be it? And then if I had a guess too, just Isaiah Bolden, I would think might have just a better shot. So he's a little bit better of an athlete. And one of the things too, where he may have been drafted in the 7th round is because he came from a division that isn't great. And he plays for one of the HBCUs. So he's the only player that's been drafted from it. So
and I think he was one of only 10 D1 AA schools one of only 10 players from a D1 AA school that was drafted.
Yeah. So the odds that because he was one of those few players that was drafted from it, he's got to be a pretty good player.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know much about him. I'm not watching Jackson State tape all the time or games, but
Oh,
just the
they were
fact that
nationally televised a lot last year, but
yeah, but just because he was drafted from there, it does give me a little bit more hope that he actually may be a little bit more something out of him. But again, athlete, really tall, big, fast. You might get something on him. Again, he may not even play for them in a year or two. So
might not make
just
the
to be
roster out of camp too.
yeah, may be interesting to see. Could be a practice squad guy, could be
Yeah.
no squad guy. But just that size and speed, it's just really interesting to see what happens. All right. That's all I had. You have anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think the one other thing is just the undrafted rookie free agents where they drafted
Mhm.
or they got the quarterback from Louisville Cunningham, I believe. I'm blanking on
Yep.
his name right
Cunningham.
now. Where he's someone that he's admitted that he's comfortable possibly switching positions where your third on the depth chart at quarterback this year is Trace McSorley, who's not going to make the team. Just
Mhm.
flat out, he's not going to make the team.
Yep.
I believe last year he started one game, he had 0 TDs, he had 5 interceptions. So he's someone that Cunningham maybe he could make it as a potential third quarterback with
Mhm.
the option of developing into a Julian Edelman type player. Up until Andre Carter signed his undrafted free agent contract with the Vikings for I think 340,000 guaranteed. Cunningham's contract was actually the record for the most guaranteed money for an undrafted rookie at a 200 something $1,000 guaranteed, which is if you're giving out that amount of money, chances are he's going to make the team.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see how they plan on utilizing him. If they do plan on utilizing him as a potential uh, third on the depth chart quarterback as a safety valve, but more developing into like a slot cornerback or a slot
Mhm.
wide receiver, potential running back out of the backfield,
Mhm.
Julian Edelman type player. And if that is the case, especially with the 2 other 6th-round pick wide receivers they got, I'm really interested to see what this team really looks like.
Mhm.
And I know we said the 4 players we're most interested in are 6th and 7th round players. I think you can lump in Cunningham in that
Mhm.
group of 5 of the top players you're looking at are either 6th, 7th, or undrafted. So
Yep.
I'm really interested to see how he fits in the system. Again, might not make the team, or if he does make the team, he might be like Lynn Bowden was with the Dolphins, where he just never materialized. But it's a low risk, high reward
Mhm.
position player as well.
Yep. And then just the other thing that I think is really valuable for him if he does make the team is just running the scout team
Yep.
quarterback where they don't really have anyone that could really mimic like a Lamar Jackson, like a Josh Allen, like Mahomes, like all these mobile quarterbacks that are getting out there because Zappy is not really fast. So they don't have anyone to really mimic that mobile quarterback. So I think he would be a really good option too, just to have out there to mimic what they have in Jackson, or else they would have to use like a cornerback or a wide receiver or something like that.
Yep.
So it's better off to have a quarterback if they have that option. So that's just another key part that may help them.
Yep. Agree.
All right.
And then I think just one thing that we just have to discuss briefly. I know you discussed it on Boston Balling is that since we last talked, Aaron Rodgers officially was traded to the Jets. So
Mhm.
another quarterback in the division in the conference, which Patriots will have to compete with. He didn't look the same quarterback he was last year, but in the second half and then in overtime, he was part of the reason why the Patriots lost to the Packers. So I don't think he's going to have the drive like Brady did when he went to the Bucks. I think that he's going to be more like Russell Wilson was with the Broncos, but he does have the talent to. It's just another guy you have to match up with and face this year, which is I think part of the reason why Bill loaded up on defense in the early part of the draft this year.
Mhm.
Just looking at who he has to face this year and the years going forward, and you're not going. Chances are the way this team is constructed, you're not going to win games scoring 30, 40 points. You're going to win games by your defense leading the way.
Yep. No, agreed. And then I think just his drive is the biggest question. I was actually shocked to see he was already at
Yeah,
OTAs.
me too.
So I didn't think that was going to be the case. But he may be there just because that he was there in town for signing his contract. So that could be the case too during the trade. But I'm really interested to see what he kind of really looks like into this. We know with the Packers, he's really skipped the OTAs and practice and that sort of stuff. Is he going to
Yep.
do the same thing with the Jets and try and rely on his talent, or is he going to actually practice and be like Brady? I just don't. I don't think he has it in him, just because I think he's a loser. But who knows? We'll see.
Yep.
It does just make you a little bit more scared. You have a real quarterback with the Jets.
Yeah.
But again, they've had options there before, and it hasn't really panned out. So, but you have a lot of quarterbacks you have to go against this year. Where last year I think you faced 7 backup quarterbacks.
Yeah. Something
Um,
like that.
so something crazy. But again, you never know what's going to happen. He could get hurt. Others could get
Yeah, he
hurt.
does get hurt a lot.
So we've got no idea what's going to happen, but it'll be interesting to see. We got more to talk about as the season gets closer. We'll definitely be having a lot of these training camp podcasts, have a lot of guests on during the off season, talk about some stuff. But again, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter for any of those up-to-minute updates. Pat's 300 Level Pod, and then subscribe, rate, and review for us. And then also our website, pats300levelpod.com. We'll have a couple of blogs coming up with the draft, detailing these players more in depth. Might try and get some tape and play breakdown if we can set that up. But more to come with that. So just make sure you keep an eye out. Follow us on Twitter though. That's where we get any of the up-to-minute news when we got our podcast release, when we have the new blogs, that sort of thing. So thank you everyone for listening again. And until next time, we'll talk to you later. Thanks.